So first thing we want to do is go back. What worked well for us in the past? We want to figure out how our panelists felt about our last year's event, how our vendors felt about last year's event. So we always send out a survey at the very end of our event to get that feedback. The feedback is the most important thing we can have because we really are going to get their honest and timely, because we send it the day after the event. We're going to get their honest and timely feedback about the event and how it went. So before we start planning for this one, I'm going to review all the feedback from last year. A lot of the feedback is going to really discuss the hours of the event, whether it started too early, ended too early, started too late, ended too late. It's also going to talk about the space that we used. Is the venue, is it easy to access? Was it easy for the vendors to find, the panels to find? Was it easy for our patrons to find? Did we give clear directions about our load in and our load out process? That is what we are really trying to make sure that we are very clear about, because that's going to help create a very smooth process for our events. Once we've reviewed all the data, we're going to figure out where we can improve and what can stay the same. Do we need to start the event earlier? Do we need to start the marketing for the event earlier? Is there a platform that we were not accessible on, that the vendors community was on, that we could not reach? There's so many factors when it comes to an event and so many avenues to reach the comic community, and we're not always aware of them. So we try to make sure that we are getting that feedback, and that when we get that feedback, we're incorporating it into our next year's event. So now that we have the feedback, we've assessed the feedback, what can we change? Can we change the time? Can we change the season that our event is in? What adjustments can we make to make this a better event for our vendors, for our panelists, for our patrons? Was it just one person didn't care for it? Is it a viable change that needs to be made? Because some people, the thing about event planning is you won't be able to please everybody. That's an unfortunate truth. What we do need to figure out is how can we affect the majority? So is it one person who didn't like the space? Maybe this isn't the event for them, and that's okay. You have to be honest with yourself about the people who are at your event. It might not be for them, and there are many, many more people who it's for, so that's okay. But we want to be honest about this, what we can bring to the table and what we can't. So what changes can we make? Okay, now that we have deciphered through all of our feedback, we've decided what changes we can make, what are viable changes, what changes make sense. We need to figure out how we envision our next event to look, given the feedback that we had. So once again, my name is Jasmine with We Are Ideas. And before we get into the ups and downs, I really want to take you through my process of going through this event from top to bottom. And before I am concerned about managing our panelists and vendor expectations, I need to manage my own. I need to be very clear about what I can and can't do in the space that we have allotted for the event, the time frame that we have allotted for that day's event, the date, what can happen on that date, depending on the weather, all of those things. There are only certain things you can do. If it's cold, you're probably not going to do water sports. You know what I mean? So I'm managing those expectations. I'm making sure I'm clear with my staff and the staff at our venue about what our together expectations are, what we want from this event and this new year. And all of that starts with feedback from the previous year. So before we start a new event, we want to make sure that our last event, we have sent a survey out to past patrons, which means our guests, our past vendors, our past panelists, and even from the staff at the venue, because we want to make sure we have a holistic view of what everybody saw from this past year's event. Did they like the space? Did they like the layout of the space? Did they feel cramped? Was it plenty of room to move around? We want to make sure that we're discussing all of those things so that moving forward, we have a clear idea of what we need in our next event. So we want to make sure we get feedback. We're going to look at the feedback, and honestly, you want to give it a good look and see, is it plausible? Does it make sense for our event? Some people are giving you feedback and it's valid, but there's nothing we can do about it. You know what I mean? Some people are giving you feedback and we kind of made the event to be that way. They're looking for a different structure, a different building. There's only so much that we can do in the space that we are allotted. So sometimes they're looking for something completely outside of what we have to give. And that's okay. There are some things we can improve upon and some things that we cannot. And so that brings me to our next thing, the next part of planning this event is, what can we change? I have all this feedback. I've looked at it. I've seen what makes sense, what doesn't. Does it make sense to make some of these changes? Will it make our event better to take the feedback from our guests, from our vendors? Some things will just have to be we won't be able to do that. That's not something we can fit in the space. That's not something that fits in our budget. That's not something the vendor where we are doing the venue will allow us to do. So some things are the way they are because there is no other option. The option is what we did. Outside of that, we want to think about, after we have all our feedback, we've decided what works, what doesn't, what we want to change, what we don't want to change. Then we want to decide, who are we bringing back? What vendors worked for our space? Because we can be honest, some people are more difficult than others. Their expectations are up here, and what we can give may be here. Given our space, given the timing, a lot of the vendors that come to our event, they have been to comic expos around the state, and some of them are much larger, so they can accommodate a larger space. They can accommodate they are longer, so they are 2 days instead of 1 day, so they can accommodate more activities. We have to work in the venue that we have. So sometimes when I talk about the ups and downs of working with panelists and or vendors, it's really managing expectations. So I know what our venue can hold, what our time frame can hold, what the expectations are from our partners at Miramar, what the expectations are for We Are Ideas, what we want our comic expo to look like. Because sometimes your panelists and or vendors, they're going to come in with ideas from other comic expos that they've been to, right? And they're not going to be bad ideas. They could be really great ideas. And we may not want our comic expo to look exactly like someone else's. We definitely, I feel we want a more community feel, a more tight-knit feel to our expo. So we definitely want to take everybody's feedback with a grain of salt. Now that we have analyzed all of that feedback, we want to look at where we are moving forward. The panelists that we have that are committed to coming back, the vendors that are committed to coming back, what do we need to discuss moving forward as we plan for our next event? And that is why it's so important for you to be clear about what your vendors are, what your partners are looking for. We Are Ideas, the city of Miramar in this case, and then what your venue can hold. Is there going to be an extra space? Is there going to be a new addition to the venue that you could add to your event? You need to consider all of that and be very clear before you start planning the next event. Because then when you start talking to your panelists, you can say, hey, if they were here last year, I know you were here last year. Let's build upon that. If they were not here last year, if this is their first time, they heard about it, they saw what a great time we had, and they want to join in on the fun, then you want to say, okay, so I know what you saw. I know you saw the video. This is what it is behind the scenes. This is what happens. This is where you are. This is what we expect from you. What then are your expectations? Correct? Because I have to remind myself that the panelists, the vendors, this is their job too. This is how they make money. This is how they feed their families. So the prices we set for our vendors to vend at our event have to be on par with what they're expecting to bring in. If I can give you a story right here, for years it was very difficult to maintain and keep a food truck at our event. And there wasn't enough communication between both parties. In my mind, I believe it's because the food trucks weren't making money, so they never responded to the survey. We never heard from them again. They didn't come back. And then we had just one or two who were willing to be very honest with us about our pricing for our vendors and how that affected their overall sales. Because vending is not my specialty. I mean, food truck vending, I know nothing about. Honestly, truly, I know nothing about it. I don't know what the profit margins for food trucks are, nothing. But I have to remember that this is a business for them as well. If it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. Have you heard that before? It doesn't. So I had to speak with one of our vendors and I had to be very honest. I said, what is your hesitation with vending with us? You know, we bring in this amount of people every year. It's a hit. The event is a hit. Everybody loves it. Why are you hesitating to commit? And the vendor was very honest with me, and I appreciate them for this. They said, it's not making me money. You're not making money? I said, no. They said, you have 2 or 3 vendors. You have this amount of people. They're not all going to eat the food that we have. But we have to bring enough food just in case they do. We sit out there for 5 hours and we're hoping that they're going to eat our food. They also broke it down. They said, this is not a food event. This is a comic expo where you want people to have an option to eat. So eating is not their main focus. Did it make sense? Yes, but it did not cross my mind. So I want you to make sure that you have an opportunity to be open with your vendors, with your panelists, with whoever you want to be at your event and say, hey, I see this as a problem. Can you explain it for me? Because I don't get it. There's a disconnect here that I'm not understanding. And they said it was our price point. So after speaking with our vendor, we were able to gain clarity about what their hesitation was in joining us for another year. And we were able to adjust our prices to make sure that it was not only beneficial to us, but beneficial to them to be there. So clear communication with your vendors. A lot of the new people who attended our event, I try to give them as much information as possible. So an up and down is that I do give them I give them a layout of the location. I give them directions on how to get there, where to unload, where the load in is, what time to load in, the time for load out, where to load out, where to park their cars during the event. All of that information is given. Sometimes it doesn't always translate. It just doesn't. I've given them the dimensions for the space, and then they arrive at the venue and are shocked. I said, well, I told you this is what it was. And they say, I do remember you saying that I still had different expectations. There's nothing I can do about that. And what we tried to do this past year to combat that is we had a site visit. That way you can come see the space ahead of time. I want our vendors to be able to know exactly what they're coming into. So we had a site visit where they could come, they could see the space, they could see the layout, and I went through where our tables were going to be, how the setup was going to be. I had it printed out so that they could see it as well, because I'm a visual person. So I had it printed out, and then when we went to the venue, I said, this is what you need to imagine. Of course, the venue was unable to set it up how our event would be set up because they have other events, but this is what you need to imagine. This is where this is going to be. This is where that is going to be. I want to make sure I'm very clear about where everything is going to be, what it looks like, time frames for setup, load in, load out, where you can park your car, where the entrance is, if you want to bring guests, all of that. Try to be as clear as possible with your vendors. And honestly, some of them aren't going to read the emails. You have to be prepared that they're not going to read them. And there's nothing you can do about that. There's going to be somebody who received the email, did not read it, and gets to the venue and is asking you questions you already answered. That's any event. So we had a site visit. We actually also, we did a Zoom call. You can't be there in person. We did a Zoom call. And people are just not going to be available for either or. And they're going to email you about it later. So you want to make sure after those events, after you do the Zoom call, you send a follow-up email saying, hey, this is what we discussed on the Zoom call. After the site visit, here are the layouts of the venue space interior, the venue space exterior, so you can see the load-in area, and there are arrows to the entrance for the load-in, and then arrows to the exit for you to go park in the garage. I'm trying to give as much visual that vendors can pick up on their own time. And panelists are similar because they bring their own equipment with them, especially if they're going to have a table, you know? They want to make sure that guests are able to see whatever products that they have, whatever merchandise that they have. Some of them are looking for a specific location. Now, all of this plays into timing, right? Because if at the last minute I have a panelist or a vendor and they say, well, I want this specific location, my dear, this is the day before the event. Everything's already planned. So if there is, for the Comic Expo, we have celebrity guests that come. They have our premium spots for tables. And then we have our vendors that are selling items. And then we normally, what has worked is giving priority to our return vendors and our vendors who are at the site visit. I want to make you spending your time at our site visit worth it. So I did. I said, you know what? I'm going to extend this. We don't do assigned tables, pre-assigned. I just kind of pick whatever. But for everyone that came to our site visit, they got the table space that they wanted. And because I had the layout, I let them circle where they wanted their table. I mean, it worked perfectly. They loved it. It makes them feel special. It makes them feel like they are being rewarded, and they are, but it makes them feel rewarded for showing up ahead of time. And they are. Because it's important, because I'm going to have less questions on the back end from those vendors who were at our site visit. They already know. I also make sure that everyone has my number. And after every email, I say you can contact me at this number. You can send me an email. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Ask me the questions. I'd rather you ask me the questions ahead of time than the day of. And again, managing my own expectations, I'm going to get questions the day of, the night before. You just are. And it could be something you've already answered. It could be a brand new question that it just didn't cross your mind, but you're going to get questions the night before. You're going to get cancellations the night before, the day before. That is life. We all plan to attend something or to be at something, and life happens and we're not able to do so. But that's okay, because on my side, I've already expected that. I can expect somebody to not be able to make it. That makes sense. It'd be silly not to expect it, in my opinion. So, a part of managing panelists, vendors' expectations is managing your own. Because I'm not surprised. Okie dokie. So, we have discussed managing our own expectations as event planners, managing our panelists and our vendors' expectations. And this is all prior to the day of the event. On event day, now we are in the thick of it, We are managing what's actually happening. No matter how hard you plan, how meticulous your plans are, something, inevitably goes astray. And so we need to be able to pivot quickly. Somebody didn't show up on time, pivot. Somebody didn't show up at all, pivot. What are our backups? What are our options if it rains and we have an outside event? What are we going to be able to move around last minute to make everything work? So in my first year doing the Comic Expo, it rained and we had to move everything inside. Because it had never rained before, it wasn't something that was really on our radar to consider, as we needed a plan B for all of those things. So in our planning for this past year, we made sure that in our schedule, we built in a rain contingency. If it rains and we can no longer use the outside space, where are we going to place these people? Where are we going to place these programs? So we had to make sure in how we're setting up our schedule that there is space in time where our outside events also have a space inside where they can go and perform as well, just in case it rains. If it works out outside, then that's great. They can have that space empty, or that the previous program can run a little bit longer. Because again, those are the things that happen day of. Things run long. They don't start on time because people are running from hither to thither, So we made sure we had a contingency plan. And that brings me to our scheduling. With our panelists want to be, prime spot. I want everybody to be at my panel. I don't want there to be any other distractions or any other high ticket programs. So if you have your guest speaker, you're not gonna place many things at the same time as the guest speaker, because you want all of your attention on your guest speaker. This is who a lot of people they have come out to see. They're here to draw the people in. So you want to make sure that we have all eyes on them for that time frame that they are speaking. So when we build our schedule, I make sure that everything is kind of boom, bam, 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 bam. Hit, not at the same time, because then they're going to miss it. They're going to have to make a decision. And some things I stagger a little bit so you can get the majority of one thing and then you can catch the end of another item. But then I also make sure I change it by what age group. So because it's a kids comic expo, we have to cater not only to our toddlers, but our teenagers, our in-between toddlers and teenagers, tweens. We have to cater to our teens, and then we have to cater to the kid and all of the adults. So that's about 4 different age groups that we try to cater to. So if there's something going on for the toddlers, maybe there's something going on for the tweens, because the parents are going to be with the toddlers. So we don't want to schedule an adult maybe where we have the guest speaker along with the toddler time, because they have to be with the toddlers. Maybe we have a guest speaker and maybe we have a demonstration. Let's scratch that guest speaker section, that half. Guest speaker, that second part where I'm talking about the guest speaker, scratch that. Maybe we have a demonstration and then we have a toddler section at the same time, because they're going to be in similar rooms. So we are not only are we thinking about the age groups that we're catering to, we're thinking about the location of the demonstration or the event, the smaller event within the big event. So we have the toddler time, and the majority is the tween demonstration at the same time. They're in the same venues, they're in the same room. So a parent can have their toddler time and they can have their tween doing the demonstration at the same time. That way they're not missing anything. Those are the things you have to think about when you're trying to cater to your panelists and your vendors, because both of them are important. We want to make sure that when we're scheduling out the event, that the things make sense to both parties. And again, that's where you ask as many questions when you have them before the day of. Ask those questions. What is important to them? Manage, understanding their expectations for the event is going to help you plan out your schedule. We've gone over managing our expectations, understanding our panelists and our vendor expectations, hiccups that happen the day of the event. As the event day winds down, you're getting the feedback. Between the end of the day and the next day, you're getting a lot of feedback. They're telling you exactly, the panelists, the vendors, the guests, they're telling you exactly how they felt about the event. We loved it. We didn't care for it. This is what we didn't like. This is what we'd like to see next year. Okay, take notes. Just take notes. I'm open to hearing all the feedback. I want to hear every piece of feedback. And then I'm going to send a survey. Again, at the end of your events, you have to have a survey. You have to understand, you have to prioritize the feedback from the people who have attended your event. Because sometimes most of the times, I'm seeing things differently than everybody else. A lot of things that go wrong at an event planner is going to see went wrong before a guest. and some things that I'm not paying attention to because I'm so focused on those other things that guests or our vendors are going to see. So one of the really good feedback we had this year is outlets. Prior, a lot of the vendors didn't need outlets because they were using the items that they were selling didn't need an outlet. This year, we had vendors who needed outlets, and it wasn't something that we had come across. So even the day of the event, there were adjustments that had to be made to accommodate our vendors who needed outlets. But now I know from that day of feedback, hey, I need to ask, I need to put in my notes, do you need an outlet space? Outlet space is limited. Is that required for your setup? Some things you won't realize are an issue until they are. Literally nobody had ever asked for an outlet. And this year we had a vendor who was printing out things. Had a digital printer. So they needed an outlet. I said, oh. And now the day of the event, I'm looking on the floor for outlets. No one else had needed an outlet because generally they are selling those funky pops. Is that what they're called? Don't quote me on that. Queenie, if it's not how it's pronounced, take it up. Or they're selling actual comics, or they're selling art. None of those things need an outlet. A digital printer needs an outlet. So we're keeping all the feedback from the day of what worked for us. I'm taking notes of everything that worked for us and what didn't work for us. And then I'm also sending out that survey. And I'm asking those questions to our vendors, to our panelists. What worked well for you? What did you need that you didn't have, that you would have liked to have? You have to, a lot of things can be multiple choice or agree or disagree, but you have to leave some questions open-ended for them to give you feedback that is not something that you've already pre-made. You know what I mean? Let me think of how to say that. You have to leave some questions open-ended to get an honest answer from your guests, from your vendors, from your panelists, from whomever you've sent the survey. And all I have to say at the end of the day is have fun. Have fun with your events. That's why we put on events. It could have been an email. We could have sent out a bunch of emails. Boring. Let's do an event. Let's celebrate. Let's come together. Let's bring people together. And at the end of the day, there's only perfection in planning. In the planning. Once it plays out, once it actually plays out, it's out of your hands. Make the changes where you can, and where you can't, use that as feedback for the next year, for the next event. Even if it's not the same event, a lot of times the feedback can be interchangeable to any event that you're doing. Do I need to ask this of my panelists? It's not the same event, but I have panelists. Should I ask them this? Yes. I have vendors for another event, for another company, for another clientele, a different kind of clientele. Ask the questions. Any feedback that you get from this event, you can always carry to another event. That's experience. That's how we make all of our events better. We experience different things. This is Jasmine from We Are Ideas. I am signing off. It's been so good to chat with you all. Y'all have a blessed day.